I'd like to tell you I feel smarter and wiser, but I just feel taller. And Judy's right, you guys actually cleaned up pretty good. So I really appreciate the opportunity to stand here to share a message with you. So I've done a lot of public speaking in my professional life. And you learn that you should anticipate the questions of the audience. So I've anticipated your questions. Right? The first question is, what in the world is Tony going to talk about? Many of you have never heard me say more than a dozen words in succession. So I'll try to answer that over the next 15 minutes or so. But the second question that I know many of you have running through your head right now, what do I have to do to avoid being up there like Tony did? I'll give you the answer to the second one right now. Be careful what you say or what you share with Judy. You know that, right? She's very persuasive. So here I am. And it's because one of the things that I've been involved with for some time at Ebenezer is the Rock of Help Food Pantry. And at some point, stories started to pile up in my head about things that happened at the food pantry. And I wrote them down into kind of a story, a short story that I shared with Judy. And so here I am. She is very persuasive, as you know. So at Ebenezer, we put our faith into action in lots of different ways, especially in ministry to the community. And one of the best is the Rock of Help. The third Saturday of every month, right, we're out here serving folks. We started by Sue Bergman. One day she just became inspired, I think, and talked to Judy about this idea. And we provide groceries, clothing, kitchen supplies, toys, whatever it is we have, including really friendly and respectful service to lots of people. During our peak times, 50 families or more will come for help at the Rock of Help. And that represents not 50 families, but at least 150 or more people, right? People who are eating because of work that we do here. It's really astounding. Most of this food comes from the Maryland Food Bank, purchased with your donations, with our fundraising, with all the great work that we do here. But plenty of it comes directly from members of the congregation. I've heard you out there swapping coupons and what's the big sale at Martin's and let's go grab this kind of stuff. Some of it comes from your own pantries. And quite a bit comes from the Taylorsville Winfield Lions Club, also known as Ebenezer Geezer East. And we occasionally get the treat of some fresh produce from Buck and Laura, Edwin Ruth, and other great people who just bring things for whatever reason that inspires them, things that they have from their home that they bring there. There's usually tables that are covered with clothing, toys, kitchenware, things like that brought by Nancy, collected from local consignment shops, brought by members of the church, things that are left over from white elephant rooms, who knows, all kinds of stuff shows up in there. And there's often things like treats for the kids. So I remember Christy's Sunday school class once had little goodie bags for every child that came to the Rock of Help. We have Halloween candy, we have whatever it is we have is out there for folks. We have the occasional wild cards. So some of you might remember the pallet of potatoes. I was running the 2 for none sale for about 2 hours. And we still couldn't get rid of all those. Anyone remember what I call the King Kong carrots? These carrots were like the size of baseball bats. And we were like begging and frankly expanding the truth a little bit to get people to take these doggone carrots. And we still had thousands of these things left over. So the patrons arrive often really early, sort of like folks that come to the Holly Mart. And they have their own protocol. They line up and they know exactly who came in what position and so forth. And they're lined up, they're waiting for us. And they wait for those doors to open. And it's normally Adrian that runs the registration and the setup there, usually assisted by Bridget, sort of like Adrian in training, I think. And the cheerfulness, the respect, the greeting that every person gets is really something to behold. And usually by name. I think Adrian, if they've been here more than once, she knows who they are personally. He greets them, we bring them in. You'll see regulars. You'll see lots of folks that know each other. You'll see extended families that come. You'll hear all kinds of conversations. Some are obviously neighbors. Some are alone. Some bring, we've had a van full of children show up in the last week or two. Many of them seem humbled by their circumstances. Many are openly grateful. Some seem embarrassed to be there. And some are clearly they're just struggling to cope with life. You know, it's a chore for them to just survive day to day, and it's painful to watch. But a bit of paperwork. We've got coffee, usually juice. Imagine that, we have Panera pastry. Panera pastry laid out for everybody out in the fellowship hall. So people come in, they're greeted, they go to the waiting area, and their orders are filled in the back. And there's usually a crew, at least a half a dozen people in the back room. Sandy, Julie, Diane, Nancy, Susan, Eunice, Brenda, Nicole, Christy, Ruth, Joanne. I couldn't even name them all, I'm sorry if I missed anybody. It's like a cast that's ever changing, depending on who wants to come that Saturday, who's available. I don't get to spend much time back there, partly by design, partly by choice, but they're obviously having a lot of fun back there and a lot of fellowship, and you can hear all kinds of things. I get to hear things like negotiation about what people might really want to have instead of what they put down on the list. And you hear a lot of negotiation about substitution, and the gluten-free or for the diabetics or whatever. A lot of horse trading going on back there, and then there's often, when you take donations. There's some negotiation about what are we going to do with that case of like really weird flavored potato chips? How are we going to sneak that out and get people to take that kind of stuff? There's a lot of that's going on back there. And I know, I've watched Sue in action a few times, and she looks at the name that's on the order form, and she goes, "I know they need more," and she's sneaking stuff into the bag, right, or into the carts that's heading down the hallway. And I've also seen her standing beside the freezer. You ever seen her scratching her head and going, "What the heck is that in the bottom?" Some mystery meat or something. Try to decide it's safe to give to somebody. But it's usually that first hour or two is just hectic, right? The first 90 minutes, it's just hectic. The carts are flying and the boxes are moving, and then things calm down. And sometimes I can hear an ice cream break happening in the back. But the best part, my favorite glimpse of what goes on in the food pantry is when somebody asks for shoes for their kids. That is the most amazing moment because it like triggers this hunt. And some of you are out there, right? This hunt for shoes for a child. And it's usually the Ebenezer women. It's always more than one of them. And they come running down the hall to try the shoes on the kid, right? And it's got to be cool enough for the kid to actually want, right? And sensible enough for the parent to actually take. And so there's a bit of that. And when there's a match, it's, the kid is smiling, that's great. But it's squealing, it's happiness. It is the most amazing thing. And it's the kid that's happy, but it's watching you that's amazing. So, there's something about the thought of a child that doesn't have good shoes that really triggers something among a lot of you out there. So when the orders are full, there's a bunch of us out front, right? We're doing the deliveries, we're ready to go to the cars. Folks like Scott, Chuck, Paul, Steve, Mike, who's that? It's hard to tell. Carl, Bridget always chips in whenever there's something going on. And that's a comedy of errors I won't go into myself. Our cars were not really designed to cross our parking lot. So the occasional wheel that disappears and drops off, and I think we've had at least 2 dumped carts. And when you get out the cars, right, they can't figure out how to open their own trunk, and all these things go on. I originally came to the food pantry, and I couldn't even tell you how long ago, and it was probably Susan that said, they need help. Let's go help. Okay, so let's go help. But for me, and that's really the message today, this simple act of delivering groceries to people's cars, it has become this really personal ministry. And a genuine growth experience. Because when you accompany people to their cars, right, these aren't people shopping at the Safeway. These are people at a vulnerable time in their lives, when they have needs, when they've had to humble themselves to ask for help. And so you get a brief chance to see them, right? And you have a chance to affect how they see themselves and how they see the world around them, how people treat them in that time of their lives. But more importantly, you get a chance to look at yourself. So during the Rock of Help, I call the parking lot, the waiting area, everything, I call it the no judgment zone. Because you will see everything that there is to be seen when you deliver groceries to people's cars. You'll see people that are genuinely hurting, and they need our help, right? They need food. But you'll also see people that drive a nicer car than you do. And you'll see people that, apparently take without a need. or that seem to be taking things to really abuse our generosity, right? To take it, resell it at the flea market or whatever that's going to do with it. You'll see all that. But that's okay. Because we're not there to judge why it happens, right? We're there to serve. And that's when you get a chance to look at yourself, right? And question, what do you think? How did you see that person? And can you refrain from judgment? Right? So as Susan has reminded me in the past, you don't know their whole story. Whoever it is that shows up in whatever circumstances, in whatever nice car, we don't actually know their story. And we're not going to spend our time worrying about it. Right? We're just going to serve. So in one of the first days at the food pantry, I rolled this heavily loaded cart. It's a beat-up old car of a young woman. It's obviously a young mom with lots of kids and all kinds of stuff in there. Loading the groceries into her trunk. And she quietly turns to me and she expresses her embarrassment and her shame. Her shame. That needing help to feed her children. I was really, that was the first time it happened to me. And I was startled into silence. I didn't know what to say. And then, you have those moments in your life, right? A phrase jumps in my head. I know it's silly, but I told her, I said, don't worry about it. We all need help. Just different kinds at different times. And she laughs and she smiles and I smile and I turn away. And I bet we've all had this feeling, right? I was just overwhelmed. Because I realized I was supposed to be there. At that moment, with that woman saying those words, I was supposed to be there. It wasn't my will. So for me, every Saturday has one or two of those moments, right? Not every person is different. Don't think this is like a hallelujah, clouds and angels at every time you walk to a car. That's not the way life works. But if your mind is open and your heart is ready, I get one or two of those moments every Saturday. And it's people who need to say something. They need to explain why they're there. Their recent job loss, right? Their change in family circumstances like a divorce. Some of them have to explain to you why their car is so cluttered because they're between homes. Some of them are clearly living in their cars. And some of them just need to be heard, right? Respectfully heard. And so that's why